because of genetic inheritance, of developmental and environmental challenges, the structures that wake up are most often reactive. That our sensitivities trigger into a reaction rather than a response. And so what we're growing over days, weeks, months, years, decades, we're growing layer upon layer of what we could call traumatized neuromuscular layers. And because the struggle in reaction is to seek relief, that what we're trying to do then is to escape pain. And whether we become aggressive or avoidant and engaged in flight, or even whether we freeze, what we're basically creating is numbness to the pain. But within the numbness is still this action of reaction, which means that the body is still trying to do something impossible. It's trying to escape its own life force that's triggering the reaction. So what we're doing with this work is we are working to educate the body to go towards what is unconsciously triggering the reaction to escape. Part of the reason for this is that at the core of our reactive system, or of the reactive self, is the responsive self. It may only be there for a blip, but at first the self is responsive, and then it gets triggered into reaction. So we're going into the reactive body to learn how to manage these layers, and we manage deeper and deeper layers of the traumatized reactive neuromuscular system, and that makes us more available to being affected by the responsive self. And the responsive self is always vulnerable and helpless. The responsive self is available to being affected by the pulse of the life force, the pulse of being. And then the demand for the responsive self is to break down, to break open, to be affected by the force, and then to reform itself in a deeper, more dynamic relationship with the being, the pulse of the being. And what this is eventually leading to is it's educating the self to dissolve over and over again. It's like the pulse of birth and death, or rebirth and death. And eventually it's educating the self to reach that point where it's able to die, where we're able to give up the self and surrender to something that is beyond the self. So biology is really not interested in what is beyond the self. It's interested in maturing the self and in the self actualizing so that it becomes more available to and responsive to what is, that it's able to meet the challenges and to grow stronger from its interaction of meeting the challenges. And the way that we do that with our somatic work is that we, as I've said before, we go in and we provoke the reactive system. Because if we don't discipline the reactive system, it will always take over, because it's our chronic habitual behavior. So we provoke the reactive system, and by doing that and working with how we discipline the reactive system, eventually we are growing a body that replaces chronic reactive behavior with what you could call chronic responsive behavior. And the habits become automatic, where the body will learn a flexibility where it goes into reaction and it more quickly comes back into a responsive presence, where it's available to what is. It's available to its inner dynamic, which means it's available to a more stable relationship to whatever environment it's in or with whomever we are with.